Broken was the soldier's heart, but he discovered the one who could heal it, Sci-Fi. Captain Elias Ward once carried himself like a man carved from steel, but those days were gone. The war had broken him, not with a single strike, but with 1,000 cuts of guilt and grief that never healed. Years ago, he had been one of Earth's proud defenders, leading a squad of soldiers against the Orcs swarm. They were young, brave, and loyal to him. They trusted his orders as if they were law, believing he would lead them home alive. But that battle had ended in fire and screams. His squad had been wiped out, every soldier under his command torn apart by the swarm while he alone crawled back alive. The higher command had called it miscalculation. Some whispered that Elias had failed his men, that he froze at the wrong moment, that his hesitation had cost lives. No one said it to his face, but he could hear it in their silence, in the way fellow officers avoided his eyes. Elias carried those unspoken accusations like chains. The medals he once polished with pride gathered dust in a forgotten box, reminders of a man who no longer existed. When he left the military, he told himself it was by choice, but deep inside he knew it was exile. He drifted from world to world, surviving on small transport jobs and mercenary work, never staying long enough to form ties. His ship was old and creaked with every jump, much like him, a machine barely holding itself together. At night, when he tried to sleep, he still saw their faces. His squad, young men and women laughing before the mission, trusting him. Then the screams, the endless swarm breaking through their lines, and the silence that followed. Elias would wake drenched in sweat, his chest heavy as if someone had reached inside and crushed his heart. On one such restless journey, he found himself on a remote mining colony at the edge of known space. It was the kind of place forgotten by governments and empires where people scraped by far from the eyes of the galaxy. Elias liked such places. They asked no questions and he gave no answers. He only stayed long enough to refuel, drink something strong enough to dull the edges of memory, and then move on. But fate had other plans. As he walked across the docking platform, he noticed the faint glow of fire on the horizon. Miners gathered at the edge of the settlement, pointing at the sky. Something had come down fast, burning through the atmosphere. A crash. Most shrugged and went back to their work. Trouble falling from the heavens was no concern for men who already lived at the edge of survival. But Elias felt an old instinct stir, the same pull that had once driven him to run toward danger instead of away from it. Against his better judgment, he set course for the crash site. The wreckage lay in the barren desert outside the colony. The ship was small, sleek, and alien. Its hull bore markings unfamiliar even to Elias, who had seen many species in his wandering. Flames still licked at twisted metal, smoke rising into the dark sky. Cautiously he approached, hand resting near, the old sidearm on his hip. The air stank of fuel and scorched alloy. For a moment he thought the craft was empty, another dead traveler lost in the void. Then he heard it, a faint sound, weak but insistent, the cry of someone still alive. He forced the hatch open, coughing as smoke poured out. Inside, among shattered panels and sparking wires, he found her. An alien, slender and injured, her skin pale with faint blue markings glowing softly under the dim light. Her eyes opened slowly, filled with pain yet sharp enough to notice him. She tried to speak, her voice broken, but Elias understood the plea. She needed help. For a moment he froze. In the past, he would have rushed in without thinking, but the soldier in him had died long ago. He told himself it wasn't his problem, that saving one more life would not erase the dozens he had lost. Yet as he looked at her, alone, wounded, and helpless, the old fire flickered inside him. His heart, though broken, still knew what it meant to protect. With a quiet curse at himself, he lifted her into his arms and carried her out of the burning ship. The desert wind howled as he staggered back toward his vessel, the alien's weight pressing against him. For the first time in years, Elias Ward felt the faintest shift in his burden. He had no idea who she was or what her presence would mean, but something deep within whispered that his life was about to change. The soldier who had once been broken, had unknowingly taken the first step toward mending his heart. Elias carried the alien woman into his ship, his boots echoing on the worn metal floor. The freighter was small and rough, a relic from a better time, but it was still safer than the burning wreck in the desert. He placed her gently on the cot, in his quarters, the closest thing to a bed he had, and searched for the emergency med kit. His hands shook as he worked, not from fear, but from the weight of old memories that threatened to surface. Her breathing was shallow, her skin marked. With burns and cuts from the crash, Elias activated a scanner, unsure if human tools would even work on her physiology. The results flickered in alien script mixed with universal codes, barely understandable. Still, he recognized pain when he saw it, and he did what he could. Cleaning, wounds, sealing burns with the med gel and wrapping bandages. She winced once but did not cry out, her luminous eyes following his every move. When at last he stepped back, he realized he had been holding his breath the entire time. She was alive, though weak, and that was enough. Elias sat on the edge of the chair opposite her, exhausted. He told himself he had only done what any decent being would have done. Yet in truth, he knew most people on that colony would have walked away. They had seen the crash and turned their backs. He had not. Something in him still refused to let go of the instinct to protect. Her voice broke the silence, soft, uncertain, but clear enough in the common trade tongue. "You helped me." Elias nodded once. "You'd be dead otherwise." She studied him with curious eyes, the faint glow of her markings pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. "Why? You do not know me." The question cut deeper than he expected. He could have said he didn't know, that he just acted, but the truth slipped out before he could stop it. "Because I couldn't watch someone else die." She seemed to consider his words. Then she whispered, "My name is Liara." Elias gave a stiff nod. "Elias Ward." He paused, unsure if he should add more than force the words out. "Former soldier." The word soldier hung heavy between them. Liara tilted her head slightly, as if she sensed the weight he carried. "You are broken," she said softly. Not as an insult, but as an observation. Elias flinched, his jaw tightening. He wanted to snap back, to tell her she didn't know anything about him. But the calm in her tone stopped him. She was not mocking him. She had simply seen what others avoided. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Hours passed. Elias busied himself with repairing the ship's systems while Liara rested. The crash had damaged more than her body. It had destroyed her vessel completely. Through halting conversation, Elias learned that she was a scientist, traveling alone on a research mission. Pirates had attacked her convoy and she had barely escaped before her ship was struck down. Her people were far from this sector, and now she was stranded with no way home. When she realized the truth of her situation, her composure wavered. For a moment, Elias saw the pain behind her calm exterior, the fear of being alone, the grief of losing her crew. It mirrored something in him, the same emptiness that had haunted his nights. Two broken souls, each carrying a burden, now trapped together by fate. The next day, Liara tried to stand but nearly collapsed. Elias caught her before she hit the ground, steadying her gently. She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw gratitude in her eyes, warm and unguarded. "You saved me twice," she said quietly. He shrugged, pretending it meant nothing. "Don't make me do it a third time." Despite the heaviness around them, a faint smile touched her lips. It was the first genuine smile Elias had seen in years, and strangely, it made something stir inside him. A feeling he thought had long since died. Later, as they shared a small meal, Liara spoke of her people's beliefs. She told him of the idea of soul resonance, a bond said to form between two beings when their fates aligned, allowing them to heal each other's wounds. Elias listened in silence, skeptical. To him, such things were little more than stories, told to comfort the weak. Yet the way Liara spoke, gentle, hopeful, almost serene, made him wonder if there was truth hidden in her words. That night, Elias lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his ship. He told himself he had saved her only because he couldn't ignore her suffering, that once she recovered they would part ways. Yet deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. Something had shifted in him when he carried her from the flames. For the first time in years, the weight of his past felt a little lighter, as though someone else now carried a small piece of it. Liara, too, seemed to sense it. Though still weak, she no longer looked at him with the distance of a stranger. Her eyes lingered as if searching for something in him that he no longer believed he possessed. And though Elias tried to push the thought away, he could not deny the truth. In saving her, he had begun to save himself. Elias had planned to leave the mining colony quickly, but fate decided otherwise. Liara's ship was a pile of burning metal, and her home was light years away. The thought of escorting her across the galaxy was not something he had asked for, nor something he wanted. He had told himself many times he was done being responsible for anyone's life. Yet when he saw her sitting quietly in the small cabin of his freighter, too weak to walk far but trying not to show it, the words that came out of his mouth betrayed his own resolve. "I'll take you to your people." Liara looked at him in surprise, her luminous eyes softening. She bowed her head slightly, the gesture of her kind showing respect. "You would do this for me?" Elias tried to keep his voice calm, distant. "You won't last here alone. The colony doesn't care. What happens to outsiders? It's safer if I get you back to your world?" She tilted her head, studying him with quiet curiosity. "You speak as if you do not care, but you do. You are different." He ignored her words and moved to the controls, powering up the ship. The engines groaned as if protesting the journey ahead, but the old vessel still answered his call. As the freighter lifted from the desert and broke through the clouds, Elias caught sight of the scorched remains of Liara's craft below. A strange feeling settled in his chest, one he didn't fully understand. It wasn't just responsibility dragging him into this choice. It was something else. The days that followed were slow, filled with silence at first. Liara rested, recovering, strength little by little. Elias spent his time maintaining the ship, checking maps, and avoiding long conversations. But silence has a way of breaking, and soon, small words began to fill the empty spaces. At first, it was simple. She asked about the ship, about the scars that marked its panels. He answered with short phrases, never adding more than necessary. Yet Liara had patience. She spoke of her people, of their culture, and their science. She told him of her research, how she had been studying energy fields left behind by ancient civilizations. Elias found himself listening even when he told himself not to care. Her voice carried a calm rhythm, like water flowing over stone, and for the first time in years, he found himself drawn to something beyond his own ghosts. One evening, as the stars stretched across the viewport, Liara asked him a question that made him pause. "What do you see when you look at the void?" Elias leaned back in his chair, staring at the endless black. "I see the battles I lost, the faces of men and women who trusted me. Every time I close my eyes, it's there." Liara's gaze lingered on him, full of quiet sadness. "You carry your dead with you." He looked away, jaw tight. "Someone asked to." She didn't argue, didn't tell him to let go. Instead, she said softly, "Among my people, we believe the dead live in our memories, but not to chain us. They guide us. They remind us of what we must protect. If we let the memory become only pain, then we dishonor them." Elias wanted to dismiss her words, but they stayed with him, echoing long after she had fallen asleep. For years he had carried the weight of his squad like a punishment, never allowing himself to believe there was anything beyond the guilt. Could it be that remembering them differently, remembering them with honor, might change the way the pain lived inside him? The thought unsettled him because it felt like hope, and hope was something he had buried long ago. Their journey was not without danger. In the outer sectors, space was lawless. Twice they were forced to dodge pirate ships, their scanners sweeping for easy prey. Elias maneuvered the old freighter with sharp skill, using tricks from his soldier days to hide in asteroid fields and mask their signals. Liara watched him closely, and each time they escaped, her admiration grew. "You fight with instinct," she said after one close call. "Not only skill, you feel the enemy's next move before they make it." Elias gave a bitter laugh. "It's not instinct. It's fear. Fear keeps you alive longer than bravery ever will." But Liara shook her head. "No. Fear alone does not save others. You move not just for yourself. You think of the ship, of those within it. That is why you lived, when others did not." Her words unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. No one had spoken to him like that since his squad. No one had looked past the broken shell of him to see something worth holding on to. One night, as they drifted through quiet space, Liara told him again of soul resonance, the bond between two, beings who carried wounds but found healing in each other. Elias said nothing at first, unwilling to believe in legends. But as her voice filled the small cabin, and as her eyes met his across the dim light, he felt the faintest pull. Not magic, not destiny, just the strange realization that he no longer felt entirely alone. For the first time in many years, he allowed himself to close his eyes without fear of the dreams. And when sleep came, it was lighter than it had ever been. The hum of the freighter's engines was steady, a low sound that filled the silence between Elias and Liara as they crossed another empty stretch of space. For a brief time, it felt almost peaceful, as if the war and all its scars were far away. But peace was never meant to last. It never did, not for Elias. They stopped at a trade outpost along the border sectors to refuel and gather supplies. The station was crowded with merchants, miners, and travelers from dozens of species. The air smelled of oil and smoke, the kind of place where credits mattered more than questions. Elias kept his head low, not wanting attention, while Liara stayed close behind, wrapped in a cloak to hide her features. He had warned her that places like this were not kind to outsiders, especially one as rare as her. Inside a dim cantina, as Elias haggled for rations and spare parts, he overheard voices from a nearby table. Rough voices speaking in trade tongue, their words heavy with fear. "They say the swarm moved again," one miner muttered. "Whole colony gone in days," another replied. "No warning, just silence afterward. Command doesn't believe it. They think the swarm won't come this far." Elias froze at the word. Swarm. The Orcs. His chest tightened, old memories clawing at him like shadows rising from the grave. He listened without moving, every muscle tense. "They say the next sector in line is the Arathis cluster," a third voice said. "If that's true, it'll burn fast." Liara's hand tightened on his sleeve. He turned and saw her eyes wide, her face pale beneath the hood. Her voice was low but urgent. "The Arathis cluster is my people's territory. My world lies there." The words struck Elias like a blade. He wanted to believe it was only rumor, just drunken talk of miners. But he had heard this before. The same whispers had spread during his war, dismissed as gossip until it was too late. Command had ignored the signs then, and his squad had paid the price. Liara's voice trembled. "We must warn them. We must go now." Elias swallowed hard, his throat dry. A part of him wanted to walk away. He told himself it wasn't his fight anymore, that her people had their own defenses, their own armies. He was just a man with an old freighter and too many ghosts. Yet as he looked into her desperate eyes, he saw the same fear he had once seen in his own men, the same fear he had failed to protect them from. "We'll go," he said at last, his voice rough. Liara's relief was visible, but Elias felt no comfort. He knew what awaited them. He knew what it meant to stand against the swarm. They left, the outpost quickly, the freighter rumbling as it jumped back into the void. The stars stretched into lines as the ship entered faster than light travel, but Elias could not shake the weight pressing on him. He remembered Command's arrogance, their refusal to believe the swarm would strike. They had been wrong then, and if the rumors were true, they were wrong again. In the quiet of the ship, Liara stood at the viewport, her reflection shimmering against the starlight. "My people believe in science and reason," she said softly. "They do not believe in sudden danger. They will not prepare unless they see proof. But if the swarm comes—" Her voice faltered. Elias joined her, arms folded, his face grim. "Then they'll need more than proof. They'll need someone willing to fight when others don't." Liara turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "And you would do this? Even after all you have suffered?" He looked away, jaw tightening. "I don't know what I can do, but I can't watch another world fall while I stand aside. I've already done that once." For a long moment she was silent. Then softly she said, "You carry pain like armor, but maybe this time it can be a weapon instead." Her words lingered with him. He had lived so long running from his past, from the battlefield and from himself. But now the war was catching up with him again. This time, though, he wasn't alone. The journey toward her world stretched ahead, filled with uncertainty. Each passing day, Elias prepared the ship as best he could. He checked the weapon systems, weak as they were, and reinforced the hull with spare plating. Liara worked beside him, offering her knowledge of alien tech to enhance the defenses. It wasn't much, but it was something. One night, as they sat in the small galley sharing a meal, Liara looked at him with quiet determination. "Elias, when the swarm comes, they will not stop. They will consume until nothing remains. My people may not listen to me, but perhaps they will listen to you." Elias frowned. "Why would they listen to a broken soldier?" "Because you know them," she said simply. "You have faced them and lived. That is more than most can say." Her faith in him unsettled him, yet at the same time, it lit a spark he thought had long been extinguished. He didn't believe in destiny, nor in her people's talk of soul resonance, but he began to believe in something else. Choice. The choice to fight again. Not for medals or orders, but because someone needed him. As the ship sped toward Liara's world, Elias sat alone in the cockpit, staring at the endless black. He thought of his squad, of their last stand, and of the guilt that had chained him ever since. Perhaps this was his chance to make it mean something. Perhaps through this fight, he could finally honor them. And deep inside, though he would never admit it aloud, he realized something more dangerous. Then fear was beginning to take root within him, hope. The freighter cut through space like a tired beast, slow but steady. Elias sat at the controls, his eyes fixed on the stars that streamed past. Every moment brought them closer to Liara's home, and closer to the swarm. He told himself that he was only escorting her, only keeping a promise. But deep inside, he knew that was a lie. The closer they drew to danger, the more he felt the old fire stirring, the one he thought had died with his squad. Liara spent her days working beside him, upgrading the ship with pieces of technology scavenged from her wreckage. She had knowledge far beyond his, and her hands were steady, even when her body was still weak from her wounds. Together they rebuilt weapon systems, adjusted shields, and strengthened the engines. The freighter was still old, still fragile, but under her touch it began to feel alive again. One evening, while they tested the new systems, Liara paused and looked at him. "Your people are strange," she said softly. Elias raised a brow. "Strange how?" "You take what is broken and make it work again, even when the parts do not fit, even when there is no reason it should succeed. You turn failure into survival." Elias gave a short, bitter laugh. "It's called desperation. Humans are good at it because we don't have a choice." But Liara shook her head. "No, it is more than desperation. It is resilience. You carry it inside you even when you are broken." Her words struck him harder than he wanted to admit. For years he had thought of himself as ruined, a shell of a man who had failed his people. But Liara spoke as if she saw something else beneath the cracks, something worth believing in. As they traveled deeper into border space, Elias decided to teach her something in return. He showed her old tactics he had used in the war, lessons passed down from soldiers before him. How to strike fast and vanish, how to turn a trap into an escape, how to use the enemy's strength against them. She listened closely, her eyes shining with curiosity. "Your people fight differently than mine," she observed one night. We plan carefully, with numbers and calculations. But you fight with instinct, with creativity. You bend the rules when they do not fit. Elias smirked faintly. That's because the universe doesn't play fair. If you fight by the rules, you lose, so we make new ones. Liara smiled, a rare light in her face. Perhaps that is why you frighten the galaxy. You do not see limits where others do. Her words made Elias fall silent. He had heard many things said about humans during his wandering years. Some called them reckless, dangerous, even chaotic. Few called them remarkable. Yet hearing it from her, he felt a strange pride stir in his chest. For the first time in years, he remembered what it felt like to believe that being human meant something more than survival. Their bond grew in the quiet moments. When Liara adjusted the ship's systems, Elias was there, handing her tools without needing to be asked. When Elias ran simulations, Liara watched with interest, offering her own insights. They moved like two halves of the same motion, different yet fitting together. Neither spoke of it directly, but both could feel it, the invisible thread weaving between them. One night, Liara told him of her people's greatest fear. We fear the swarm because we cannot understand them. They do not think as we do. They do not bargain, they do not hesitate. They consume. To us, it feels like facing the void itself. Elias leaned back in his chair, his gaze hard. The swarm isn't the void. It's a living thing, and living things can bleed. They can be fought, beaten, destroyed. You just have to stop treating them like gods and start treating them like an enemy. Liara studied him, her eyes reflecting the faint starlight. And you believe you can teach my people this? Elias hesitated, then gave a small nod. I don't know if I can, but I'll try. Because if they don't learn, they won't survive. As they neared her homeworld, the stars around them grew busier with traffic. Merchant ships, patrol craft, and civilian vessels moving in and out of the system. Liara's eyes softened as she gazed at the sight of her people's territory, yet fear lingered beneath her expression. Elias saw it clearly. They're not ready, she whispered. If the swarm comes, they will fall apart. Elias placed a hand on the controls, his jaw set. Then we'll make them ready. The words surprised even him. He had not planned to stay, not planned to fight again. But now, with her beside him, the thought of walking away felt impossible. He had already lost one family. He would not lose another world without trying. That night, alone in the cockpit, Elias thought of his squad. He remembered their laughter before the battle, the way they had believed in him even when he doubted himself. He had carried their deaths as chains for so long. But now, for the first time, he felt a shift. Perhaps he could honor them not by drowning in guilt but by fighting once more, carrying their spirit into a new war. Liara entered quietly, standing beside him. She did not speak, but her presence was steady, like a flame against the dark. Elias glanced at her, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself a thought he had long buried. Perhaps he was not broken beyond repair. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could still be more than the man who had survived. And as the freighter descended toward her world, Elias knew one thing with certainty. The fight was coming, and this time, he would not face it alone. Liara's world was beautiful, a jewel of rivers and shining cities, but Elias saw only its weakness. The people walked in calm order, their streets filled with lights and towers of glass, but there were no defenses strong enough to hold back what was coming. As he guided the freighter into the landing port, Elias felt the old weight press down on him. He remembered other worlds, other colonies, and the silence left behind when the swarm was done. He clenched his fists and swore he would not let this place join them. The council of Liara's people met them in a vast hall of crystal walls and silver floors. They listened as she told them of the rumors, of the colonies already destroyed. Her voice was steady, but Elias could see the frustration in her eyes when the council dismissed her warnings. The swarm has not crossed this far before. One of the elders said, "They are a distant threat exaggerated by frightened travelers. Our world is safe." Elias could not stay silent. He stepped forward, his voice sharp and heavy with memory. "That's exactly what my commander said. They were wrong. I watched entire systems burn because no one listened. If you wait until the swarm is on your doorstep, it will be too late." The council murmured in disapproval. To them, he was just a human outsider, a soldier from a war that was not theirs. Yet Liara stood beside him, her presence giving strength to his words. "You do not have to trust him," she said, her eyes firm. "But trust me. I have seen the signs. If we do nothing, we will fall." Still, the council remained divided. Some wanted to prepare, others argued for patience. In the end, they delayed, promising to study the matter further. Elias left the hall with clenched teeth, his anger boiling. He had seen this before, leaders waiting, debating, while death crept closer with every passing hour. Liara followed him out, her steps quick. "Elias, I am sorry. They are blind." Elias stopped, his hands tightening at his sides. "Blindness is one thing. Arrogance is another. They think their world is untouchable. That arrogance will kill them." She looked at him, her voice softer. "Now, then we must act without them." The decision was made. If the leaders would not fight, Elias would prepare whoever was willing to stand. He began with the city guards, teaching them tactics no one on this world had ever considered. He showed them how to set traps, how to fight in small squads, how to use their terrain as a weapon. At first, they doubted him. His methods seemed reckless, even foolish. But when they tested his drills and saw how effective they were, doubt turned to respect. Liara worked beside him, using her scientific knowledge to improve the defenses. Together, they set up shield generators in key points, reinforced communication systems, and adapted human strategies into alien technology. It was not enough to stop the swarm entirely, but it was enough to give them a fighting chance. As days passed, more of Liara's people began to listen. Rumors of the swarm's advance reached the city, each one darker than the last. Panic spread through the population. The council still hesitated, but ordinary citizens began to look to Elias for guidance. To them, he was not a stranger anymore. He was the soldier who had faced the swarm and lived. When the first ships of the swarm appeared on the edge of the system, there was no more time for debate. The sky lit with alarms and fear shook the world. Elias stood at the command post, his eyes cold and steady as he watched the screens. The swarm had come, endless as always, their black ships like a tide of shadow. "Hold the lines," he ordered, his voice calm. "Do not waste fire. Let them come close, then strike." The defenders obeyed, their hands shaking but their will hardening under his words. Liara stood beside him, her presence a constant flame at his side. The battle began with fire. Swarm ships descended in waves, their weapons cutting through the sky. Elias directed the defense like a conductor leading a desperate symphony. He ordered feints, surprise strikes, and counterattacks that no one else would have dared. His tactics were dangerous, but they worked. Again and again the swarm ships fell, broken against the stubborn will of defenders who refused to yield. In the chaos, Elias fought not just with weapons but with words. His voice carried through the comms, steady and unyielding. "Stand your ground. You are stronger than you know. Every second you fight is another second they fail." His courage spread like fire. Soldiers who had never seen real battle before stood firm against the impossible, their fear turning to resolve. Even when losses came, they did not break. They followed Elias because he carried himself as if defeat was not an option. The swarm pressed harder, their numbers endless. Explosions shook the city, fire lighting the night. But Elias refused to retreat. He led raids himself, striking from the shadows, ambushing the enemy in the streets and vanishing before they could respond. Liara watched him, her heart torn between fear and awe. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose, yet everything to protect. By dawn, the city still stood. The swarm had not been destroyed, but they had been forced to pull back. regrouping for another assault. For the first time, Liara's people saw that the enemy was not invincible. They saw that survival was possible. That defiance was stronger than fear. Exhausted and bloodied, Elias stood on the wall overlooking the smoking horizon. His body ached, his scars burned, but his eyes were fierce. For years he had believed he was broken, unworthy of the uniform he once wore. But here, standing with Liara beside him and a world looking to him for hope, he felt something stir within. He was no longer just a man running from ghosts. He was a soldier again. The smoke of battle still hung over the city as the new day began. Fires burned in the distance, sending columns of black against the pale sky. People moved among the ruins, pulling survivors from broken walls, carrying the wounded, and rebuilding what little they could. Fear still lingered, but so did something new: hope. For the first time, they had stood against the swarm and had not fallen. Elias sat on the edge of a ruined wall, his rifle across his knees. His body was bruised, his armor scarred, but his eyes were steady. He watched the people below as they worked, their faces changed. They no longer walked with calm ignorance, but with the fire of those who had faced death and survived. They looked to him often, their gazes filled with respect. Once he had been an outsider, a broken soldier wandering the stars. Now he was their shield. Liara approached him quietly. She had been with the healers helping the wounded, but her own face was marked with exhaustion. She sat beside him, her voice soft but sure. "They believe in you now." Elias did not answer at once. He looked toward the horizon where the swarm ship still lingered like shadows waiting to strike again. Belief won't stop what's coming. That was only the first wave. They will return stronger. She followed his gaze. Then we must be stronger too. The council has changed. They are calling for full defense. They want you to lead it. He turned to her, his eyes narrowing slightly. Their faith is late, but I'll take it. If they want a chance to live, they must fight with everything they have. In the days that followed, the city became a fortress. Under Elias's command, soldiers trained day and night. Walls were reinforced, weapons upgraded, and strategies sharpened. Liara worked tirelessly to adapt new shields and energy weapons from human and alien designs. Every corner of the city prepared for the storm. When the swarm returned, the sky turned black. Thousands of ships descended, their hunger driving them forward like a tide of metal and fire. The city shook under the bombardment, but this time, the defenders were ready. Shields flared, artillery roared, and fighters launched into the sky, like sparks against darkness. Elias stood at the command center, directing every move. His orders cut through the chaos, each one sharp and clear. He sent squadrons to strike weak points, organized ambushes in the streets, and pushed the defenders to hold where others would have broken. He was everywhere at once, his voice carrying the weight of survival. The battle raged through the night. Explosions lit the sky, buildings fell, and screams filled the air. Yet through it all, the people of Liara stood firm. They had seen what Elias had taught them, that the swarm could be fought, that survival was possible. In the thick of battle, Elias led a strike team deep into the enemy lines. The swarm had brought a massive command ship, its shadow covering the city. If it remained, the defenders would be crushed. He knew what had to be done. With Liara at his side, he led the charge. Fighters and soldiers followed him, their courage bound to his. They fought through endless waves of enemy drones, their weapons glowing in the night. Elias moved like a force of nature, every strike precise, every order pushing them forward. Liara fought beside him, her calm mind turning chaos into strategy. Together they reached the command ship. The battle inside was brutal. The corridors were filled with swarm machines, relentless and merciless. Elias fought with every ounce of strength he had left, his heart pounding, his body screaming. He remembered the faces of those he had lost in past wars, the silence of dead worlds, and he swore this place would not join them. At last they reached the core chamber. The swarm's control nexus pulsed with dark energy, the heart of the beast. Elias planted the charges, his hands steady even as the enemy closed in. Liara covered him, her weapon burning as she cut down the drones that swarmed around them. The last charge was set. He turned to her, his voice low. Once this goes off, the command ship falls. The swarm will scatter. Her eyes met his, calm despite the chaos. Then let us finish this together. They ran, fighting their way back through the corridors as alarms screamed. Behind them, the charges detonated. The ship shook violently, explosions tearing through its core. Fire and light consumed the vessel as it began to fall. Elias and Liara barely made it to the escape craft. The ship roared around them, breaking apart as they launched into the night. Behind them, the command ship collapsed, crashing into the sea with a blast that shook the heavens. Across the battlefield, the swarm faltered. Leaderless, their ships scattered, their assault broken. The defenders roared with victory, their voices rising above the smoke and fire. For the first time, the swarm had been defeated here. Back in the city, the people cheered as Elias and Liara returned. They had not only saved a world, but given it the strength to fight for itself. The council bowed to them, the soldiers saluted, and the citizens called his name. But Elias did not see himself as a hero. He stood on the walls that night, looking out at the horizon where the stars burned bright. Liara stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You gave them hope," she said. He shook his head. "Hope was already here. I just reminded them how to use it." For years he had believed his heart was broken, buried under loss and guilt. But now, standing with Liara, with a world saved by their courage, he felt something new. His scars were still there, but they no longer defined him. The soldier's heart was no longer broken. It had been mended, not by war, but by trust, by courage, and by the bond he had found in the one who had believed in him when no one else did. And for the first time in many years, Elias looked to the future not with sorrow but with hope.